So number one is really about trimming public sector bureaucracy, how we can make our money work harder within the public sector itself. I hope you have already watched part one where I considered the arguments for and against the raising of the GST rates. This is part two. In part one, I actually came to a stand that it is probably the right move for the Singapore government to have raised the GST. An unpopular stand, I know, I'm sticking my neck out to say that. However, I think the government's offsets in terms of the GST vouchers could have been better communicated, could have been better implemented as well. And I thought I should also share with you GST rates of other countries, especially developed countries, and also the countries close to Singapore. For example, if you go to this PwC webpage, you'll find a list of countries and their GST rates. You'll see Australia here, 10% GST rates. Let's scroll down further. Let's look for perhaps Canada. Canada, GST rates range from 5 to 15%. So maybe we take an average and we consider that as about 10%. Let's scroll down further. Finland, 25.5%. Germany, 19%. Okay, and in fact, a lot of European countries, look at Italy, 22%. Ireland, 23%. Japan, 10%. You get my point, right? Let's take a look at Malaysia. Malaysia, 8 to 10%. Scrolling down further, you have New Zealand, 15%. Philippines, 12%. Scrolling down further, of course, Singapore at 9%. Switzerland, 8.1%. United Arab Emirates, considered a very low tax regime because they are so fat with oil revenues, 5%. United Kingdom, 20%. So look around the rest of the world, especially developed countries, and you will find that 9% GST rate is actually quite modest. So I hope that also puts things in perspective. It is never pleasant. Raising taxes is never a pleasant affair. And in fact, in economics, we also learn that where fiscal policy is concerned, there's usually an expansionary bias. That means governments around the world, because of election pressures, they will try to spend more and cut taxes. But that is also why many governments around the world are heavily in debt. We don't want a government that becomes heavily in debt. It is really going to spoil the economy and hurt standard of living in the future. You'll be kicking the can down the road. So I hope this puts things in clearer perspective, and I'm sticking my neck out to make these points. I hope you will receive them well. I also think that we need to consider other suggestions, because otherwise 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we might be hearing about another need to raise the GST. So these are two suggestions that I already publicly made back in 2018, and Straits Times published my views. However, I can no longer find an online version. So I did repost an unedited version, my raw version, on my blog, which you can check out. Two suggestions that I gave. Number one, to trim the public sector bureaucracy. So this is something similar to like what Elon Musk has been doing in the US to trim out redundancies, to trim out inefficiencies, etc., that we cannot allow for a bloated public sector bureaucracy. And I think that theoretically, what economics students would have learned is that government has a great tendency to suffer from productive inefficiencies. Singapore government has already been known to be one of the most efficient governments in the world, but I think there is always still room for improvement. And that could include reviewing the role, the job of the CDC mayors as well. Now, along with that, have you all heard of this story from civil servant that his organization had to spend a certain amount of money because they had surplus, they had excess, and if they did not spend that money, then the Ministry of Finance will probably cut their budget the following year? If this is true, and I suspect it is, there are some perverse incentives in the system, right? And if every organization actually can have surplus, can have excess, it should be celebrated, it should be welcomed, it should be returned to the Ministry of Finance, and we could put more in our reserves, or we could dish out more CDC vouchers if needed, etc. So I think that's something to be considered. So number one is really about trimming public sector bureaucracy, how we can make our money work harder within the public sector itself. Now, number two is the implementation of luxury taxes. I know quite a number of opposition parties, they have been suggesting wealth taxes, but as I also wrote in my post, wealth taxes, except for property taxes, they are not going to work very well because a lot of the wealth is mobile, the wealth will be shifted out of Singapore, and there are also a lot of ways to avoid and to evade, I think, wealth taxes. So generally, wealth taxes, except for property taxes, which our government has already been increasing over the years, generally that's not a very ideal move. Instead, how about considering luxury taxes? This has been implemented in some countries around the world, and so we have examples to look into as well. And what I'm talking about is something like a higher GST rates for supercars, for luxury handbags, for private yachts, for private jets, And the list continues, right? There are many luxury goods. There are also many rich and super rich in Singapore. They are consuming all these luxury goods. And these are opportunities for us to raise taxes. I don't think, given their standard of income and wealth, that they will necessarily reduce their consumption just because of a higher tax rate. I think this is just a very tiny pinch, or not even a pinch. In economics, we also learn this thing known as the ostentatious effect, which basically means that if the price goes up, in fact, they may consume more because they want to flaunt their wealth, right? So luxury taxes, I think, should be considered by the Singapore government as another potential tax revenue. So with that, I hope GST rates remain no higher than 9% in the coming years. With that, ciao.